Good morning, everybody. All right. It is the 20th of October. It's a Thursday morning. It's early in the morning. We're going to kick this thing off. It is the Ask Me Anything for the CrossFit Linchpin private track community. And as always, today's episode is sponsored by black coffee. Okay, that's cup number 2. It's hot, life's good, and we're going to dive right in here. Got some good questions, as always. I won't waste anybody's time. We'll get this rolling here. Let's see. Okay. I've got a bunch of questions that were all had roughly the same number of upvotes, so I'm going to try to get through, 4 questions or so and see how it goes. First one is from Wendy B, and Wendy says, can we talk about how older female athletes lose muscle mass and it's harder to regain it back as we age? Great question. So, I will say, well, I'm not going to dive into that right now. What you need to do is watch or listen to the next upcoming Varied Not Random podcast. So, this podcast is Linchpin Conversations. I do another podcast called Varied Not Random, and that's with myself and Adrian Bosman. And that gets posted every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And you can just search Spotify or iTunes or whatever for Varied Not Random. Or you can go to the Beyond the Whiteboard, the BTWB YouTube channel, and under the Varied Not Random playlist, find the latest and greatest one. But next Tuesday's episode, so let's see, what would that be, the 27th of October? The 25th. 25th of October, be on the lookout because Varied Not Random episode 81 will launch on that day. And not to let the cat out of the bag too much, but Adrian and I did an entire episode on that. And in case anyone is now thinking, how dare you? How dare 2 gentlemen do an entire podcast on women's aging and women's issues? Don't worry. We had 3 women on the podcast to bounce all of these very common questions, the same one that Wendy asked, and many more, like kind of the most common questions heard about women's specific training, aging issues, things like that. And so we did an entire podcast on that. So be on the lookout for that next Tuesday. It will be episode number 81, and I think that you will enjoy it very much. I will say, though, there are some things that nobody escapes as time marches on, right? And, in your question, Wendy says how older females lose muscle mass and it's harder to regain it back as we age. That is absolutely true, and the same thing applies for men as well. I haven't heard a single male who says, what is absolutely awesome to just pack on tons of lean muscle mass being 51 years old. Nobody says that. And nobody who's in their 50s says, the weight just falls off these days. I don't even really have to try that hard. Just suddenly my abs are just shredded, and it's just as I get older, I just get more shredded and I'm just so jacked effortlessly. So I think some of these, topics, questions, and issues relate very much to both men and women. Now, certainly women have some things going on that seem to be unique to them as well, and that's why we dive into it with an entire podcast in the upcoming episode 81. So hopefully everybody enjoys that. The topics that we covered were like the most upvoted ones, period. Okay, this is going to be another one which is kind of getting back onto a VNR thing, Varied Not Random, because we've hit these topics before. So if there happens to be an already entire podcast episode on a topic, I will point somebody towards it. So somebody else's question, Sean M, said, the likes of lifting belts and knee sleeves, should they be used? Why and when? Fantastic question. And somebody highlighted this episode to him, so I appreciate that. But for everybody at home, you can go, same deal, find Varied Not Random episode number 38, and we discussed lifting belts, knee sleeves, all kinds. I think there's like 10 different items that we covered all different types of gear, and whether we felt they had utility or they were fluff, how should they be used. So VNR, Very Not Random, episode number 38 will be a great one for that. I will say quickly, though, that, where is it here? Lifting belts and knee sleeves. Lifting belts, knee sleeves, and so many other things, they absolutely have utility, for sure. And like so many other things, it just depends if they're being used intelligently and appropriately, or have they become an unnecessary crutch. And I'm not trying to say that you have or haven't gone down that path, but to some degree, a lifting belt, while a lifting belt isn't magic, you can't just put a lifting belt on your midline and you're quote-unquote safe and stable and now you can lift more weight. You still, with the lifting belt, it will ideally just be an aid which helps you be very aware as to whether or not you are bracing your midline properly or not bracing your midline. It's probably one of the biggest utility factors there in the belt itself. And so some of these things in and of themselves don't just solve some problems, they still have to be used appropriately. It's kind of like we could say the same thing with doing a band for banded pull-ups. The band has utility, but if you just put on some really crazy heavy band and don't make it hard for yourself and disconnect your brain and always just blow through your pull-up sets unbroken, you're not really using the band for what it's for. It should be something which makes what you're doing possible yet still difficult, so you get better at the activity. So a lifting belt, it certainly has utility, it just needs to be used properly so that it achieves its aim. So I think you'll enjoy episode number 38. Okay, here we go. Eric C.M. What are the best ways to combine CrossFit training with the sport of your choice? All right, good question here. So here we go. So, not to sound like a broken record, but 2 episodes that might assist you, Very Not Random 14 and Very Not Random 15. It's a 2-part. Collegiate Strength and Conditioning meets CrossFit, Part 1, and Collegiate Strength and Conditioning meets CrossFit, Part 2. So check those out. But then I would say, in general, it depends on the sport. Different sports have a different degree of demand on the body. Are we talking road biking, cycling, mountain biking, soccer, football, MMA, rugby? What do we have going on for the sport? And then for the sport, are you playing the sport solely as just a joyful hobby and a pastime, or does it pay your mortgage? There's an entirely different deal. If you are a professional soccer player and playing soccer is your weekly paycheck and is putting braces on your kids' teeth and keeps food in the fridge, well, that's quite different with regards to how you're going to approach your strength and conditioning program, which potentially would be CrossFit to make you better on the field of play, versus, you're an adult, you've got some free time, you like to play around in the adult rec soccer league every now and then for fun, and you wouldn't mind if you were a little bit better on the soccer field when you went out there with your buddies. Those are 2 very different pursuits, because if it is just, and what I believe that it probably is, just a fun hobby, a fun pastime, well, the cool thing about that is that you'll have a bit more wiggle room with your experimentation to find out what is the sweet spot of how much you can play your sport each week and how many CrossFit workouts and how intensely can you do those CrossFit workouts before one starts to interfere with the other. So if you're just doing it for funsies and you find out that you overdid it that week and you're a little extra tired and not quite as peppy on the football field as you want to, quite frankly, no big deal. You're like, okay, I guess I should dial it back a little bit. Versus if it pays your mortgage and suddenly your teammates are like, you didn't pull your weight tonight, you're going to sit the bench and somebody else is going to take your spot, that's a very different deal. But that's probably not what we're talking about here. So you're going to have to do a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of wiggle room, and quite frankly, you're going to have to identify which is more important and which is the priority, and which do you want to give the lion's share of your effort and energy to. So if you want to be better at CrossFit, and that's the more important thing, you might be willing to stick with this example, you might be willing to let your soccer endeavors slide a little bit. If soccer reigns supreme in your life and you don't care so much then about where you fall on the leaderboard with CrossFit, well, then that's going to make that decision a little bit easier as well. And so it just depends personally. You need to make that decision for yourself. There's a great story that I heard many times from Greg Glassman back when we were traveling on the road and all that. And he was loved to cycle, road bike. And so you can just take this story and apply it to your own life. But he's been cycling for years around the Santa Cruz area, so was quite familiar with the typical rides that he would do, the typical courses, the roads, the effort level, the hills, how long it would take, what it felt like, because he'd been doing it for quite some time. And then, start doing CrossFit on top of that, and just basically played with how many workouts per week, how intense could he go for each one of those workouts, until the road cycling started to suffer. And it was X number of workouts, right? And if you reined it back by one workout, felt great on the bike. If he added 1 or 2 workouts a week, the bike suffered. So back and forth you would go until you found that sweet spot, and each person may have to do that with their life, their sport, their training regime, their recovery, all that kind of a stuff. But everyone's going to have a different number of workouts that they can do in a different sweet spot. And it could be a bit of a moving target as well, right? Because it might not be just how many CrossFit workouts can you do per week, because there's so many other variables in there, from loading to are you going below parallel to is it a heavy day to the intensity that you bring the workout. So I guess my point is, maybe you can do 5 CrossFit workouts a week if they're all done moderately, and that doesn't affect your play on the soccer field. Or you may have to reduce that from 5 to 3 if you're going to go pretty hard on those 3 workouts, because you might find that 3 workouts with intensity feels the same to you as 5 workouts done moderately. So again, that's why there's not going to be one singular answer to each person with every sport. It's going to be this many workouts, period, end of story. There's going to be some experimentation and some wiggle room and some personal variability there. And I don't see a way for you to find out what that's going to be for you without trial and error, quite frankly. So hopefully that was helpful. The next one here, this is a good one. This is a classic one. It involves CrossFit and CrossFit's embracing not only Olympic lifting, but Olympic lifting in workouts, right? Multiple repetitions, high rep Olympic lifting, we shall say. A question as old as time. So this one is from Kyle L. He says, I've always been nervous about doing Olympic lifts at high reps and high intensity. Considering the level of technical difficulty these lifts present, why are lifting schemes like this considered part of the CrossFit methodology? Thank you. So, great question. So let's tackle it. There's a couple parts in there. So the first one is, why are these Olympic lifts in the way that they are programmed part of CrossFit? And so they're programmed in workouts, like mixed modality workouts, and they're programmed as singular standalone strength days, right? Because you might get a snatch, for example, on a 7 sets of 1 strength day. And so you're doing a snatch and you're waiting for a couple of minutes, and nobody really has an issue with that. If anyone does have an issue with something, it's probably more in a workout like Isabel, right? Or Grace, where you're going to do 30 at 135 pounds or 95 pounds for time. And so now we have an Olympic lift at a moderate loading done with intensity. And that, if somebody does have an issue with something, is probably more with that. So let's think, first of all, why is what you're talking about part of CrossFit, to answer that question? And I would say, quite frankly, building power, speed, accuracy, coordination, strength, improving flexibility, amongst a host of other things that we would probably agree that we would want to get better at. So even though something like snatching, for example, isn't seen in nature, and one of the things that CrossFit says it does with its definition of functional movements is they're, movements that are unavoidable. They're found in nature. You can make a serious case that snatching is not found in nature. Clean and jerking, potentially, but snatching, not really. So something like snatching would be considered or included in CrossFit because even though maybe it's not found in nature, it has tremendous value for what I just said previously, and the transference of the movement lends itself very well to you being competent in a whole host of other tasks. So that in and of itself makes it very valuable. And they have earned their place in the training regime because they work, quite frankly. And what do I mean by work? Improve your fitness, improve your strength and conditioning, improve your work capacity across broad time modal domains, however you want to define it. They work and they get the job done, along with a host of other tools that we have at our disposal. And so Olympic lifts are in there. Now, yes, getting back to the, makes them nervous, considering the technical difficulty that these lifts present. So yes, the clean and jerk and the snatch have an elevated degree of technical difficulty, but that doesn't live in a vacuum. They have an elevated degree of technical difficulty compared to what? I watched a series on Netflix several months ago about brain surgery. I'm here to tell you that clean and jerking and snatching have absolutely no technical difficulty whatsoever compared to what I saw on that show. Now, relax. I know that was probably an over-the-top crazy example. I'm not comparing brain surgery to lifting a barbell. Right, but my point is, yes, they are technically difficult, but compared to what? Compared to a bicep curl? Yes, undoubtedly. No argument for me whatsoever. They're far more technically demanding than many, 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 many other things in the strength and conditioning world. We're 100% in agreement on that. More so than the shoulder press, an air squat, a kettlebell swing, yes. But most of what we do in CrossFit, quite frankly, is more technically difficult than what I feel comfortable saying that most of us did previous to CrossFit. So previous to CrossFit, I know for myself, I came from more of a classic, bodybuilding style lifting regime. I feel like most guys did. Go to the gym, and Monday and Thursday was chest and triceps. Tuesday and Friday was back and buys. Wednesday and Thursday was legs and shoulders. You sprinkled in some abs. You sprinkled in some cardio. Everything was like 3 sets of 10 with a minute rest in between. And, Arnold Schwarzenegger in his Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding told me that I'd be a beast. And I wasn't. And my first CrossFit workout, which required actual true fitness, dismantled me as if I'd never worked out a day in my life. And so, point being, most of that stuff that I did beforehand, single joint, relatively very low technical difficulty or machine-based isolation movement. Now looking at CrossFit, not even talking about clean and jerking or snatching, but I just saw people doing kipping pull-ups and thrusters and burpees and box jumps and rope climbs and handstand walking, and holy cow, that's really crazy stuff they're doing, and it's so technically difficult and hard. And that was true compared to what I had done previously. So everything has to have a metric from which we're measuring whether it is difficult, not difficult, more or less so, etc., etc. And that'll be a bit different from everybody's background. But I would say that the overwhelming majority of movements that we do every day in CrossFit have an elevated degree of technical difficulty compared to most non-functional or isolation joint or classic bodybuilding or machine-based working out. And that's not a character flaw or a value judgment against any of those things. I would say it's just kind of a factual statement, quite frankly. So, let's see. And I would also say that almost anything that we do, everything that we do should be given the same degree of care and attention, right? Like if you're not comfortable with Olympic lifts or something like that, yeah, they can seem like they're potentially injurious. And why am I doing this at speed, under load or whatnot? Well, I'm here to tell you, you can get yourself into just as much hot water deadlifting more quickly than you should, back squatting more quickly than you should, hopping up on that pull-up bar when you're too darn tired to try to punch out that next set and your grip's starting to go and you're hyperventilating. Like, fill in the blank for whatever it happens to be. You can make a good decision or a bad decision with any workout, any movement, any loading. So I would say clean and jerk, snatch, deadlift, back squat, air squat, push-up, kettlebell swing, like I don't care. There's some general guidelines that I feel should be rather ubiquitous and apply to all of them. And I would say, here it is, do not move faster than you safely and properly can with solid technique. I don't care what the movement is. I don't care what the loading is. I don't care if it's a mixed modality day. I don't care if it's a classic heavy day. Do not move faster than you can do so safely and properly with solid technique. And if you abide by that simple statement, it will be really tough to get yourself into hot water. It kind of is just that simple. Slow down if you need to. Clean and jerk, snatch, deadlift, it doesn't matter. Slow down. If you start to feel, due to fatigue, your brain disconnect from your body, your technique get a little sloppy, and you're getting out of sequence a little bit, slow down. Take breaks. Drop the darn barbell until you recover enough. And recover enough might be 10 seconds. It might be 2 minutes. Who cares? Let the clock run. Who cares about the clock? Everybody has a pace at which they can move appropriately. They can push themselves well. They're riding that wonderful line where they're still moving well, but they're challenging themselves. And that's where you want to be. And that's going to be a different speed and a different loading for every athlete out there based upon where they are in their fitness journey. So if potentially with the Olympic lifts, you're a bit earlier in your fitness journey, that's okay. Everybody's been there. Reduce the loading, reduce the intensity, slow down, drop the barbell and rest as frequently as you need to do whatever it is that you're doing properly and correctly. And that should ideally alleviate some of the fears or concerns that you mentioned a second ago. Don't worry about doing things touch and go. That's just some weird virus that has invaded the community. Touch and go is not demanded, not prescribed. You don't have to do anything touch and go. Drop the darn barbell every time and don't pick it up again until you are ready to pick it up again. If your level of competence and your level of fitness and whatever the workout happens to be lends itself to you can do this particular thing touch and go, and it's appropriately challenging for you and you're moving well, have at it. Have a blast. Touch and go for as long as you want. But at the point where touch and go is happening for ego or Instagram or leaderboard reasons, and it's not a logical, rational, safe, intelligent, long-term health and fitness play, drop the darn barbell. Rest. Hop off the pull-up bar. Rest. Wait till you do the next box jump. Rest. Then and only then proceed. Reduce the loading if you have to. Practice, 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 practice in your warm-ups, in your cool-downs, whatever is the lift that you find a bit irksome and isn't quite there yet. Practice, practice. That's going to be the way to get yourself better at it. And if you're not there yet, as you continue to practice, if the squat snatch makes its appearance in a workout and you've been practicing, but you're just not quite comfortable there yet to put it in as your heart rate starts to elevate a little bit, that's okay. That's why modifications and substitutions exist. And then you can modify or substitute that movement out of that workout that day, still find a way, if we're talking squat snatch, to get in a nice explosive hip opening, to get yourself below parallel, to support some loading overhead, to have it taxing on your midline. We can find something to make that happen without that particular movement as you continue to practice it on the side. And then and only then, when it's right for you, will you put it in. And you'll be most likely quite good to go. So, and everything that I just said there applies to every single movement and every single workout that we do. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Let's end with 3 shout outs. And these are all 3 very timely ones that just happened like this week, because just a couple days ago we did everybody's favorite workout, 3 800-meter runs for time. Just the most glorious and widely embraced workout in the world. No, but people did them and I appreciate that. So here's just a couple cool shout outs. First one is from Sarah M. And she says, so her times for the 800s, she got a 5:10, a 4:59, and then a 4:29. And she says, my times are not fast, but this is a huge win for me. I ran all of it with no stopping and no walking, and that's something I could not have physically or mentally done 4 months ago before I started Linchpin programming and found this amazing community. Thanks, everybody. So first of all, that's awesome, right? I personally like really celebrating these things. Yeah, the super fit man or woman who always puts up big lifts and big times, put up another fantastic time. That's great. I'm not actually not trying to be like snarky about that. That is great. But I think it's easy to forget because those, like the really fit athletes get so much attention that, yeah, they put up, in this example, blazing fast 800-meter run times. And wow, you did them all in 2:30. Like, wow, that's really fast. That's great. But you have to remember there's somebody who, an 800-meter run, they're not worried about how fast they can do it. They're worried about if they can do it. Is it even possible? Could I even do this without having to stop and take a break and walk? And it's a monumental achievement. So I love hearing these stories. It's because this is how the whole process starts. We've got people in our community from, back squatting 500 pounds for multiple reps to doing ridiculous times on workouts, like insane men and women who are just absolute beasts. And then we've got people just starting their fitness journey, and all of us are in this together, helping people go forward, and it's really cool. So, Sarah, congratulations. Then the next one, also for the 3x800-meter run. This is from Ben F. Let me zoom in so I can get the times here. So Ben says, I was excited to see this workout today, not because I like running. Actually, I despise it. There's something most people can probably relate to. I was excited because this was my very first workout as a member of the CrossFit Linchpin private track back in May. I knew how out of shape I was and discouraged I felt after that workout, and I wanted to see if I'd made any progress. Well, the workout still kicked my butt, and it's not the best conditions in Washington State right now due to some wildfire smoke, but I PR'd. This is encouraging, brick by brick. So his combined times, let's see, the first time he did it, his runs were 4:32, 4:53, and 5:17. This week when he did it, 3:55, 3:58, and 4:05. So when you add his 3 800-meter run times together from the first time he did it, and you add his 3 800-meter run times together from when he did it this week, he had an overall improvement of being faster by 2 minutes and 44 seconds. 2 minutes and 44 seconds faster overall. That's ridiculous. So congratulations. And the final one here is from Jamie S. And again, it's the 800-meter runs. She said, last time I did this 5 months ago, I marked the workout as did not finish. And today, she finished. So again, how awesome and how cool is that? So congratulations to everybody out there. I don't care where you are on your fitness journey. The mere fact that you are on the journey, you're winning. You're lapping everybody on the couch, right? You're crushing it. So keep it up. Keep supporting one another. Thanks for all the good questions, and enjoy your rest day. We'll talk later.